Hello everyone, it's another marvellous Monday, and this week I'm going to do something a little bit different by taking a look at the 1/6 scale Sideshow Collectibles Gambit figure. Now, this is Gambit, of course, based on his early 1990s costume as created by Jim Lee, and I think most people would agree that this is his definitive look. Sideshow Collectibles have had a few forays now into this 1/6 scale X-Men line, all of the costumes being based on Jim Lee's designs from the very early 90s. We've had Wolverine, and we've had this wonderful Cyclops as well. Now, sadly, I don't own either of those. Gambit actually does represent the first figure in my personal collection in this line. So I'm eager to get started, open him up, and see what he's like. In terms of the packaging, it is your standard 1/6 scale oblong packaging. It is slim and narrow, and of course it does have this outer sleeve which lifts off, which we'll take a look at in a moment. In terms of the design, it's quite an interesting approach. It's quite clean and simple, which I think is all for the good. It's interesting they've opted for a strong colour pink here, contrasted against the white. It's quite simple. There is just a simple photo here of the figure in a close-up shot. I think it looks quite attractive. It's a little bit garish, perhaps. I think the tone of pink they've gone for, it's quite bright and in your face. And whilst I think it's quite presentable, it's probably not the kind of thing I'd want to put on display. Now, if we look at the side panel of this outer sleeve, again, there's really not an awful lot going on here. This is a very simple design. It is just that flat colour in there between the pink and the white. It's absolutely fine, but it does seem like a waste of that space because we could have had something interesting for people who want to stack these on their shelf. It would have been quite interesting to have something specific to this character. However, in sharp contrast to this, the packaging underneath, and as we can see on the reverse of this packaging here, is a completely different story, and I really like this. So this is what we can see from behind. This is the underneath card, and I think this looks absolutely fantastic. Of course, they've replicated the cover from Gambit 1 in his first miniseries. Fantastic artwork, just a really wonderful approach. I love this. I think this is very displayable, and it's the kind of thing I would put on display. Now, when we remove that outer sleeve, we can see a completely different design aesthetic underneath. First of all, we can see the figure in the packaging, of course, in its window display, and we have this blue banner around the edge of it. I really like how we've got the name of the character stenciled in there using artwork from Jim Lee's comic book work of the 90s. I think this looks really effective and is very fun. And if we look at the side panel of this under packaging, we can see this wonderful artwork, and it's completely different all around the packaging. If we look at the other side, we can see more of a collage effect here from different panels. I just think this looks absolutely tremendous. I really like this design approach. I think this is really fun and very evocative of the character and the era. And if we pull the figure out of this outer packaging, we can see even on the inside borders, we can see more panels from the 90s comic books featuring Gambit, which is absolutely fantastic. We can also slide off that banner there to reveal the figure underneath, and then we can see there's actually two compartments here that contain Gambit and, of course, all his various accessories as well. I have to say, the overall presentation of this figure is actually pretty striking. I particularly love his trench coat, which we'll look at a little bit closer in a moment. But if we start off by taking a look at this head sculpt, I think it's fair to say they've done a really good job capturing the likeness and the essence of the character here. I particularly like how he's got that slight smirk going on his face. That definitely feels like a Gambit expression. This is really very nicely done. There's actually a lot of detail here. Of course, it's very difficult to pin it down to one specific moment in the comic books. Obviously, this is leaning very heavily in Jim Lee's artwork, and I think they've captured that very nicely, but brought it to life and given it a lot more attention to detail, I think. I particularly like how he's got a lot of stubble around his face. There's a lot of like creasing in his expression there, as well as eyebrows, and I really like the paint apps on this. I think they've done a tremendous job of capturing that flesh tone, but also the little details around the eyes, particularly the eyes themselves, which of course glow a sort of reddy pink. Looks really strong. As I already suggested, probably my most favourite part of this figure is actually the trench coat. I think they've done a tremendous job with this. It's a very nice, firm fabric material, which feels authentic. It's not leather, but it feels very thick and sturdy. And I really love this detail of the belt as well, and how this belt buckle works. You can tighten this up nice and tight, you can leave it open. And if we open up the trench coat underneath, we can see this fantastic silk lining as well, which is quite detailed, which is a nice little extra detail that I don't think is actually present in the comic books, but it's really nice that they took the initiative here to give us this extra depth and texture to this figure and the character. I love this. Interestingly, for the body armour, they've given him a sort of plastic shell, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, but underneath this you can see he still has his fabric costume, which is still very nice. So of course this is just a plastic tunic that goes around the fabric costume underneath, which is a sort of lycra material. There's lots of fine stitching work on this coat, and I like the little details of the shoulder clips at the top there, and if we look at the buckles around the bottom of the cuffs as well, I think that's very, very nicely done. It looks really smart. There's other little details like the buttons on the coat, of course, but if we lift the coat up and we look at the lycra pants underneath, we can see that he's got that classic sort of square design running down the side of each leg as well, which is fantastic. If we look at his boots, these are made from a sort of plastic resin, but they've done a very nice job with the sculpting, and we can see some decent paint apps on here to give them a bit more texture and depth as well. And they're a very nice shiny metallic silver paint as well, so they catch the light nicely. And if we look at the sole of the shoes as well, we can see they've got this fantastic design underneath. I particularly like this sort of X logo that they've got there at the top. I think that looks very, very cool and is a nice little touch. Now I have to be honest, I do have mixed feelings about the tunic. Obviously this is meant to be a sort of armour piece that he wears in the comic books, and they've opted for a plastic piece, which is the cheap way to do it, I suppose, but it doesn't look that effective. Like, it's absolutely fine, don't get me wrong, it's not painful, it doesn't look amateurish or anything like that, but I think in terms of the texture, it feels off. And it feels a little bit hollow as well. I would have much preferred they'd opted for some kind of rubber here, just to give it that texture, that Kevlar kind of feel, and it would have felt a bit more authentic, I think. So let's take a look at the articulation. There is of course a ball joint in the neck here, so we can easily turn his head from side to side. We can sort of lean it left and right, although to be fair, not a huge range of motion, but I am being very, very careful and very gentle with this. I don't want to push it too far and snap anything. Now his head will also nod up and down as well. Again, not an absolutely astonishing range of motion, but pretty serviceable for what I wanted to do. Now he's got ball joints in the shoulders, and as you can see, there's a huge range of motion here, so it will lift up and out pretty much as far as you're going to want it to go, which is fantastic. And there does seem to be a complementary bicep swivel there as well to support this, and there are of course double jointed elbows, which is really good for being able to get his lower hand all the way back to the top of his head there. Now all in all, this feels very secure and sturdy, if a little light. Now he does have ball joints in the wrists as well, so they will rotate all the way around, and of course they will hinge forwards and backwards, although again this seems a little bit restricted, not quite as far as I perhaps would have liked or expected. He does seem to have a swivel or a ball joint in the waist here, so he can move from side to side easily enough, and he can arch from left to right as well. But there's really no give when it comes to bending forwards or backwards. That might be simply because of the plastic body armour that he's got, or it might be something to do with the articulation. It's very difficult to tell from here. Now he does have ball joints in the legs, of course, so he can kick his legs out to the side. There's a complementary thigh swivel at the very top as well, so he can spin his upper leg around, and of course he can kick his legs forwards, backwards, double joints at the knee, so he can kick that lower leg all the way back, and there is a little bit of give at that lower leg as well, but I'm not sure if that's just the plastic shin pads or whether it's actually an articulation point. Now there is a ball joint at the ankle there, so he can arch his foot forwards and backwards, and of course move it from left to right. I am really pleased to say that Sideshow have been very, very generous when it comes to extra pieces for this particular figure. He comes with no less than 3 additional pairs of hands, ranging from gripping hands, fists, pointing hands, and expressive hands as well. This is pretty fantastic. I can't think of any other gestures I would want this character to make. I think they've covered all bases here. But to capitalise on that, they've also done the exact same hands again, but this time with that kinetic energy charge effect as well. So of course they have that sort of translucent pink at the tips. I think this is absolutely tremendous, and they've done a fantastic job of these. He also comes with this charge card sort of flying effect as well, which is very, very cool, as well as a single charge card with the energy coming off just the tip of it, which I think is a really nice touch, as well as 4 individual aces that are non-charged. He also comes with his bow staff, which is an absolute essential for this character, and an alternate hairpiece as well to create a very different look for Gambit from a later era in the comic books. I should also spotlight that he does also come with this display stand, of course. It is in this hexagonal shape, but it's very, very bland. As you can see, there's absolutely nothing going on here. There's no lights, there's no patterning, there's no design at all. It's just simply a matte black. It does have a strange texture. When you rub your hands on it, you will find that a black sort of dust comes off and stains your hands. You'll have to wash your hands after that, so you might want to be wary about placing your figure on this to begin with without rubbing it down, but it is a little bit strange, and that they've not really done more with this, because I think, you know, this is an opportunity to do something quite exciting and interesting for the stand. Not that you particularly need that, but it would be nice just to enhance the overall presentation. So looking at some of these accessories in action, I have to say I love these kinetic energy hands. I love this charge card as well. I just think it looks so good. This just perfectly encaptures the spirit and the essence of this character. I think this looks absolutely fantastic. Likewise, I really do like this energy effect as well, this sort of throwing the energy cards. It looks pretty cool. Again, very specific to this character. It can create some fantastic displays and dynamic poses with this effect. It's a little bit of a tricky one to get right though, and I think you will have to persevere for some time to get the exact look that you want. There's these two little holes in the effect that you can kind of slide onto his fingers, so you've just got to persevere with that to make sure that it looks quite right, and that will take a little bit of time, but it looks really, really good, and it's very, very effective when done properly. Pleasingly, the hairpiece is very easy to remove because it is just held together with magnets, so you don't need to worry about snapping anything, which is always a huge relief, and it's very easy to swap these two hairstyles over. And my word, I have to say, again, credit to this fantastic face sculpt, because the whole image looks completely different with this alternate sort of hairpiece that we've got here. This looks like almost a different figure, so I think they've done an absolutely fantastic job with this, and I love that we have these two different options for Gambit from two distinct eras in the comic books, and both of them look absolutely fantastic in my opinion. I have to say, I'm really, really pleased with how the bow staff turned out in particular. It feels as though it's made from metal, so it has a nice weight to it. Of course, it catches the light beautifully as well, and there's two convenient gripping parts as well where you can hold this, which looks really, really good. Now, I'm not sure if you can actually unscrew the ends of this, but you really don't need to. It just slides very easily into his grip, and I think this just looks really, really effective, and again, opens the doors to all kinds of fantastic dynamic poses that you might want to put this character in. And let's not forget that we also have the uncharged hands as well, and the uncharged playing cards. I think this is a really nice extra touch, so you can have that sort of before and after effect if you want, but I think this looks really, really cool, and again, it's so Gambit. I just think this is fantastic. So then, in terms of final thoughts, I have to say I'm super impressed with this figure. I love the tailoring on it. I really particularly love that trench coat. I think it's just so neat, it's so stylish. The stitching is fantastic and the details are wonderful. They've done such a great job with that coat. I'm very, very impressed with it. Likewise, I think it's great that they give us two different options in terms of that hairpiece there to create two very different looks for this character. Both of them are really, really well done, and I love that we have that option to do that. So credit to Sideshow for thinking of that. Likewise, I really love his accessories. I think they've done them tremendously well. The kinetic energy hands that are transparent, that catch the light, fantastic. Love that they have the charge card. The individual non-charged accessories as well, having multiple versions of hands, which I think is just fantastic, and those playing cards. And then of course that bow staff as well just adds a whole new extra dimension and texture to this character. There's no shortage of different looks and displays that you can put this character in, and that's the way it should be. It does feel like you're getting value for money there. On the flip side, I do have to point out there's a couple of things I'm a little bit disappointed by. Chiefly, I think it's a real shame that they opted for a lightweight plastic for that armour in the chest piece. I think that's really disappointing. It feels a bit hollow, it feels very, very lightweight, it does restrict articulation, and it just feels a little bit painted on in terms of the paint accessories. It just looks a little bit amateurish for what is otherwise a really top level, high quality action figure, and I just think it's a real shame they didn't opt for a sort of rubber piece here. This would have been really effective. It would have supported any articulation that's in the waist or in the torso there, and it would have looked really good and felt much more accurate and authentic. Likewise, I think the shins as well just feel a little bit too plastic-like, although they look very, very good, so I'm not that critical of these. But again, if they'd been made of a slightly different material or more robust material, then this would have been a bit more effective and felt a little bit more robust. And I would say, as an overall, the figure itself does feel very lightweight in terms of the materials or the plastics they've used for the actual body and the limbs of this figure, which is a little bit concerning. Now, I don't feel at all like there's any danger of this breaking or snapping, but it does feel a little bit light for my liking. It would have been nice if it had a bit more heft and a bit more weight to it. That would have been a little bit more reassuring. But all that being said, I have to say the overall effect of this figure is pretty phenomenal. I'm very, very pleased with it. And based on the strength of this figure alone, I would be very keen to pick up some others in this line, because this is a really impressive figure and there's a lot of love and care gone into it. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.